right.
Okay, welcome to Accelerate Yale's Web3 webinar. Accelerate Yale is the shared interest group for Yale alumni entrepreneurs, and we're here to help our community. Today, we've got a great panel. I'll let them introduce themselves in a moment. We are sponsored by Goldie Blocks, and I'm going to let Jonathan Goldberg briefly introduce his company.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I mean, number one, just as a Yale SOM MBA alum, just really grateful to be here and appreciate the opportunity to participate through Accelerate Yale. A little bit about the company, founder of a Web3 native marketing PR agency. And so, know acutely the super critical role that communication plays in advancing everything that we're all doing in this space. So just really grateful to be here. And ultimately just proud of the Yale alumni, Accelerate Yale, Yale Angel Network for hosting this and advancing the conversation. So got a great panel lined up and excited to be here.
Thanks, Jonathan. So I'll set the stage because Web3 can really cover a lot of things. And I think a lot of terms get used interchangeably from, crypto to NFTs to blockchain, etc. So to give a little history, Web 1.0 was about the masses passively consuming information. It was static, basic connectivity, and it was referred to as the information superhighway. It was there for you to consume information. In Web 2.0, the masses became the creators. Platforms amassed and sold that data, and it became dynamic, editable, user-driven, social, and open sourced. And now the third iteration, Web 3.0, is about the masses owning their own data and it being on the blockchain, not a central platform server. And it allows the owner of that data to monetize it themselves. And it's decentralized, publicly visible with verifiable ledgers, and the privacy is supposed to be baked in. So everything that I mentioned is from blockchain and cryptocurrencies. Those are the Web3 infrastructure, right? And they enable systems of ownership and finance via NFTs and other mechanisms that can be used for products or services, even into the metaverse, right? So all of this is part of Web3, and we're going to have a really interesting discussion about a lot of aspects of this. First, I'm going to let the other panelists introduce themselves. Unfortunately, Janine Yorio was not able to join, so maybe we'll talk about the metaverse, but probably won't be focusing on it as much. But I'll start from my top panel. Eben Smith, please introduce yourself.
Hey, Chris, thanks for having me. My name is Eben. I graduated 2005. Known Chris for quite a long time. I am involved in a couple different parts of the ecosystem. I'm the manager for World of Women, which is one of the larger NFT projects over the past year. And I recently co-founded Wang United, where we bought an English soccer team and launched an NFT project this past Friday, which has gone pretty well. And so we're really focused on where you can build community. And I think that most of what we hear is the story about price. And the problem with the story about price is that it can go up and down and it's not sustainable. And I think a lot of what needs to be focused on is what this technology allows you to do, which is still being explored and is kind of up for debate about how real a lot of it is. So I'll stop there.
Thanks, Eben. Yakubu?
Hey, everyone. I'm Yakubu. So been in venture now for 4 years. I had a couple of funds, one Frontier Ventures, the second one is a smaller fund called Acreage. Actually is one that I started at SPV with my friend Serge Amuzu. I'm involved, Yale, graduated from Yale in 2005 also, along with Chris and Eben. Let's see, involvement in blockchain. So at Frontier invested in a company called Blockstack. What was cool about Blockstack, it was the first Reg C or Reg A? SEC Reg, one of the, either Reg A or Reg C token offerings. So it was, fully legit, SEC audited, approved, and everything. And the motto for, well, it was called Blockstack, now it's called Stacks, was don't be evil. Sorry, can't be evil, right? So Google's was don't be evil, and Stacks is can't be evil. The idea being that because of the technologies that Chris mentioned, namely decentralization, distributed ownership, and a fully transparent ledger, that Blockstack didn't have the ability to just ridiculously data mine and own data and change and manipulate and all that sort of thing. So it couldn't be evil. Another sort of involvement with Web3, in December of last year, with a company called Modly, co-authored a patent for NFT marketplace. It sounds more personal than it really is. It was essentially a series of diagrams, a process diagram, of how a user would sign a contract to buy a modular home, and then the minting process for NFT based off right after that contract had been signed. But it was pretty cool. Got to work with a lot of cool people, and yeah, really excited to be here.
Thanks. Lisa.
Awesome. Hey everyone, I'm Lisa Carmen Wang. I'm a former USA national champion gymnast turned serial entrepreneur, angel, crypto investor, executive coach, currently the founder of the Bad Bitch Empire. We're building unapologetic worth and wealth for women in Web3. We define a bad bitch as a woman who takes charge of her body, her boundaries, and her bank account. And we have 3 pillars. We have our education pillar. So we launched the Bad Bitch Bitcoin Bootcamp to teach women how to invest in crypto confidently. We have our media arm, so the Bad Bitch Empire podcast, where we're interviewing bad bitches in Web3 who are building their empires, breaking barriers unapologetically. And then we are launching our fund, investing in female-led ventures in Web3 and beyond, but really focused on making sure that as the technology advances and there is more investment coming into the space, that with the promise of Web3 creating a more equal future, creating this new economic system that truly allows participants from all economic backgrounds to participate, that potential actually comes true. And so in order to encourage more women to be participants, we think it's really important to have the education to educate, the media inspire, and then the fund to actually invest and encourage women to build and participate so we can actually fulfill the potential of Web3. And background, Yale University, 2012, bachelor's. I studied literature, even though that wasn't the most practical major. I somehow leveraged that into Wall Street, Silicon Valley, tech, crypto, the whole thing. And I think I'm really passionate about this work because having been in just continually the most male-dominated spaces, and I think as a young woman building my career there, that's just something that I want to teach women as they're rising up and saying, you can get into spaces, you don't need permission to be powerful. And the other thing I'm working on is I'm writing my first book with HarperCollins called The Bad Bitch Business Bible on going from good girl to bad bitch. And that's being released next year in the fall.
Great, thank you. Well, I think that's a great place to start because the venture industry, tech, is historically been a male-dominated industry, white male-dominated industry, and I feel like that's not as it's definitely still dominated the Web3 space is, but I think it's less so, and I think that there's more access. And I think that there's a lot of opportunities for community building around women specifically. And I know that Eben, with your involvement in World of Women, there's a way to leverage NFTs and community to create a self-propagating community. So do you guys want to talk a little bit about how you're leveraging, say, NFTs or community for women specifically to create inclusion?
I'd let Lisa go first. I mean, she that's exactly what she's doing. So go ahead, Lisa.
Sure. So I think just some stats are really helpful. So right now, when you think of investing is the #1 most power generator of wealth. And so our focus at Bad Bitch Empire is really getting 1 million bad bitches investing in Web3. And so 25% of VCs are women, less than 20% angel investors, less than 15% are crypto investors. And I think just like any other industry in the industry in the financial world, education and language is really important, and it generally becomes a barrier the moment it becomes jargon. So when you think about just 90% of money articles that are targeted towards women are about spending less, saving, or they're negative. And the exact opposite is true of money articles targeted towards men, which are positive, about investing and opportunity and growth. And so what that actually invokes is this sense of fear and discomfort, where 65% of women are uncomfortable making investment decisions. So that's whether that's stocks, whether that's crypto, it's just across the board. And then not to mention just the overall boys club. So while I think that the technology, again, the potential of the technology is there because it's permissionless and trustless, but education is going to be one of the most important areas to focus on in order to make the entire landscape not intimidating. And so that's why we focused right off the bat with the education side and speaking to women in a language that is welcoming and fun. So, we'll talk about how Bitcoin is like the granddaddy of crypto. We'll talk about how Ethereum is the DJ. He brings everyone to the party. It's like we're building NFTs. And so I think it's just being really aware of how jargon actually keeps people out, and playing upon the psychology and the gamification of what women really want to do, which is often to collaborate, to talk, to, honestly, share what they're feeling in terms of going through the investment process and then ultimately buying their first crypto. So our focus is at that initial stage of the funnel, which is how do you educate women? How do you bring them in? And then ultimately have them make their first investment without being afraid of the volatility, but actually understanding the true long-term vision of why blockchain technology is important. And then if a woman is at an accredited investor level, she has the opportunity to actually invest in the Bad Bitch Empire Fund. And we then have that education side of how do you think about diversifying your portfolio? How do you think about investing in stocks versus startups versus Web3 technology altogether? So I think a lot of it is just investing is lonely. Women want to do it together. And so we're leveraging just the excitement around the technology and the excitement around building wealth into the opportunity to actually play a bigger part, an integral part into Web3.
I think, education really is important. And I hadn't thought about the jargon component when I first got into investing in defense technology. It's a whole nother language. It's all acronyms. And it took me a long time to even be able to speak to the people that I was trying to engage with. And Web3 is no different, right? There's a very specific language, everything from hodling, right, to the actual technical terms. And so education is definitely a way to break down one of those barriers and make people less fearful of getting involved. And that's actually something that my wife did. She did an online Cornell class on Web3. So that was something that really spoke to her, and that got her into the space. So I definitely, that resonates with me.
Chris, I would just add though real quick, like, I think that one of the, this is just my personal take, but one of the really hard things is everything is about the investing and about the money. That is like the only story that keeps getting told. But that's not like, I was listening to some podcast, I think it was Richard Kim from Galaxy Interactive who said this, but like, it's really hard to build community where money is the main thing binding people together. In fact, money is used where you don't have a common community that already shares values as a way to share trust. And I think that like what's really tricky is we had this like total mania, but within that mania is like, there really, as I see it, like maybe 3 to 4 use cases for this tech. So one of them is it's a good way to self-select and gate community online. Like we're already seeing that. Right now it's being done around like cartoon JPEGs, but it'll probably evolve into something much richer than that. The second thing it'll do is like be pretty easy for loyalty reward programs or other kind of ways to kind of share things with, brands that you care about. But the most important thing is that when you buy an NFT, if it's built on ERC 721, it's like interoperable with everybody else who's plugging in ERC 721 wherever it goes. So like the one use case I really believe in is there's like $120 billion or something like that of virtual goods bought a year. I think 30 billion are cosmetic, and almost all of them are in walled garden economies like Fortnite or Roblox where you can't take them off. And you'd expect over the next 5 to 10 years that would evolve into a way where when you buy a digital sweatshirt somewhere, you can carry it wherever you go. And so what's interesting is like a lot of this is all speculative, obviously, but the speculation is that if I buy something, that fits on my Bored Ape, I don't own one Bored Ape, but if I did, it would fit on my Bored Ape. It would also fit on whatever character I maybe inhabit in World of Warcraft or something like that eventually down the line. And so, so much is focused on like the gains and losses. And it's interesting because like Ethereum and Bitcoin are maybe investable assets. I mean, it depends on who you ask. But like people who are buying cartoons and aren't planning to take advantage of the intellectual property they're given from those purchases, which is a really hard thing to take advantage of, it's like not really an investable asset. And so it's been kind of like all the focus is over here, and like, I don't know, needs to be over there.
Well, why it doesn't necessarily need to be and looked at as an investable asset, but maybe an investment into a community or access,
Sure.
like a membership, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
obviously, Bored Ape Yacht Club has in real life events, right? Where if you own an ape, you have access and you can buy specific merchandise that you couldn't buy otherwise. But bringing it back to World of Women, one problem that we've identified is getting women into Web3, breaking down that barrier. But then it's once they're here, it's creating a community and supporting them and keeping them engaged, right? And if you can signal by putting this World of Women NFT as your LinkedIn profile or whatever other profile picture, you're signaling that, hey, I'm part of this community and this community is here. It's people like me, it's women like me who are here to support each other.
The number one use case right now is the real estate on your Twitter profile picture has now become valuable. And so it's a way to signify who you are and what matters to you in a very quick way. If I see somebody has a verified Bored Ape on the profile, like what do I know about them right away, right? They have at least $100,000. They, which is like wearing a fancy watch, that they're into this kind of culture, that they, it's important to them to be this, to be X, depending on when they bought it. They've probably got $1 million at this point because of how many giveaways there have been. Like, and all sorts of things from there. And eventually I would expect that to have a second layer on top of it where you're going to buy, skins just like you would buy skins anywhere else that you're spending time in the digital universe. Twitter's just kind of like the first one that's already being used by NFTs.
I think it's also important to just meet people where they are. Because we're all in the Web3 space, there's a natural assumption, I think, the more you get into the jargon, that like people know what you're talking about. So I just went to actually my 10-year Yale reunion, and friends who have been very successful who are not in the Web3 space, and I started talking about, I'm going to NFT NYC, Web3, and I use like Mint NFT Web3, and then someone was like a partner at McKinsey is like, hold up, what foreign language are you speaking? Like Web3 is not even a normal term. And so when we're talking about how do we bring people into a space, like minting an NFT is foreign to the majority, like 99% of people, even the verb mint. And so I think a lot of it has to go back to like culture and storytelling, and why is it relevant to someone's life? Because like we actually, when we did the funnel analysis of who joined the Bad Bitch Bitcoin Bootcamp, it was really interesting because in this funnel, the smallest group of women were actually crypto curious. And they said, okay, I want to learn, I want to build wealth. Then the next largest group was, I'm interested in financial empowerment and financial independence. And I've heard about this Bitcoin thing in the headlines, but I've heard a lot of volatility, but I'm interested. But the largest group was like, I have no idea what this is, but I saw the term bad bitch and like, I want to be a bad bitch. So like, I just like figured I'd check this out. And then you give them what they want and then you feed them what they need. But it's like understanding what it is they care about, because if someone doesn't care about Web3, they're not going to care about Web3 because you tell them to care about it. It has to be like, how is this going to help me? And so I think it's just like, especially as intellectuals, being Yaleys, it's always like great to speak very intelligently. But I've learned like in this market, especially if you want to bring more people in, it's like really simplifying your language and saying, hey, I'm here, I'm your friend. Let's talk about like in a very, very simple way, without me seeming smarter than you. Like, this is how it works. And maybe if you're into it, like I can help guide you.
When you say you want to bring people in, Lisa, like, how do you, I always feel like I want to teach, or not teach, just like give my point of view on stuff, right? But I always feel icky with that feeling of like bring somebody in, because it's like often a large commitment of capital and or time to make these kind of decisions. And so it just feels like so much of the problem is not doing what you're doing, which is doing it in a careful and educated way, but the like what you see on Twitter of like, look, like you, through FOMO, I'm going to convince you to come into this thing you don't understand quickly while you're like confused. And so it's like, I'm always very sensitive to that feeling. So I'd be interested to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, so I go back to some of the deepest systemic challenges that women face, which is really, in this case, like shame around money, like feeling selfish about prioritizing yourself, your own worth, the fact that even though $30 trillion is about to transfer into the hands of women, less than 20% have a investment plan. Even in the stock market, less than 26% of women invest, not because they don't want to invest, but because they're afraid to, because they feel imposter syndrome, they're not educated. So what, at least in the focus that I have, the reason why the tagline is unapologetic worth and wealth, it's the same lack of confidence that doesn't allow you to invest is the same lack of confidence that says, I can't negotiate my salary because I don't believe I'm worth it, or I'm afraid to push against certain barriers that are already in place. So I think that just the gaps in investing, or the gaps in women becoming CEOs, are just symptoms of a greater underlying problem. But it's, in understanding like marketing and branding, it's like you do latch on to certain trends that people are excited about right now. People are talking about crypto, women are talking about investing. But I think you're right in that it's not just about the gains for women, because if it's been about the gains, like we've heard that more than enough, but it's like, hey, you don't have to do this alone. Using the same psychology of women love to come together. We like to talk about, our emotions and shopping, and how do you make that really fun? So it feels like when you're minting an NFT or when you're making an investment, that you're going out shopping with your friends, but at the same time, you are building wealth. You're learning how to invest in yourself. You're learning how to invest in community. So I think it's a lot of it is using we language versus like, I did this, you should follow my footsteps, FOMO, FOMO, FOMO. But like, hey, I went through this. We can do this together. We can create a better future. So it's a lot more just empathetic language when I think about how I communicate and how to make it seem less about forcing someone to do something outside their comfort zone.
I had a question. Oh yeah, go on.
No, please go ahead.
Oh yeah, thanks a lot. So I'll do a little bit of a preface before I ask the question. Don't worry, it'll be short. I was in, and it's going to be a question to Lisa actually. So I was recently in a discussion, and it was African Americans in crypto, and initially I'd say it was very highbrow discussion in the sense of like it was about how do you price crypto, and one person said it's undefined, another person said it was zero. I was like, oh, whatever the market says it is, and it was that type of sort of, I'd say, academic discussion. But one person brought it back, I'd say, to the topic of the room, and was like, we have to understand that for a lot of African Americans in particular, like this crypto is marketed as like there are a lot of scams around it. And that's the first exposure a lot of people, especially lower income African Americans, have to crypto, is through crap coins, through scams, etc. And so it really made me realize that I had to temper sort of my cheerleading around Web3, because if I'm saying, oh, sort of the market decides and it's 60,000 today or 20,000, whatever it might be on a particular day, then that could be taken as, oh, wow, this is the key to generational wealth, right? Like, and so the question is, when you're thinking about, Lisa and Eben too, when you're thinking about how you bring people in, do you also kind of keep in mind, I have to not only educate from zero to something, but also have to make sure I'm addressing some of the misconceptions, some of the assumptions that might be wrong?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the whole, never put your eggs in one basket, never, invest more than you can afford to lose, diversification. And so that's just basic portfolio construction, right? Diversify and like, think about how much money you actually have. Like, are you willing to put in 20% into investments? And what percentage of that are you going to put into high risk investments? But I do think it's always caveating and saying, this is a really high risk investment, startup investing, crypto investing, all of these new assets. And it's only if you can afford to, and you're interested in being a part of the future. So for example, we have a lot of women who are coming in as LPs into our new fund. And a lot of them are first-time angel investors. And part of why they are investing is they've wanted to angel invest before, but they're like, it's lonely. I don't know how to source companies. I've heard that I shouldn't put everything towards one company. So instead of putting 50K towards one, they're putting 50K checks into a fund and getting access to 50 to 100 companies. And then as we're doing that, we're providing updates. We're like, here's how we're sourcing deals. If you're interested in coming to our pitches, we can show you how this is done. But I think it's a lot of that is just not misleading people and saying this is a get rich quick thing. Like, there is no such thing as getting rich quick. And like, everything is really working hard, making mistakes. And you have that buffer to make that mistake initially, because even with startups, 90% of them are going to fail, maybe 99% are going to fail. But if you do have a diversified enough portfolio and you think about it like this, maybe 2 to 5 of them will be hits, and then that will pay everything back.
I mean, there definitely is that element of like, people are saying like it only goes up, right? Like you can't, like it's a one-way ticket to wealth. Whereas it's much more akin to playing, penny stocks, right? Which probably has the same rate of success.
Yeah, to answer your question, Kubu, I try really hard not to tell people to get in. The only advice I've given people is, like people like my parents, I will say, take, 2 to 4% of your net worth, put it in Bitcoin and Ethereum and hope it goes to zero, because it means your US dollars are fine. And if your US dollars aren't fine, it's probably a good hedge to have on. NFTs, I look at as like, do I think that more people are going to spend time in digital worlds and online? Yes. Do I think they're going to want to self-express and own things? Yes. Do I think that NFT tech will be the tech that it's built on? If Facebook doesn't win, then yes. And so I think it's a good place to spend time and build stuff, but I don't think it's necessarily like an asset class that people should invest in. If they want to play a game, it's kind of a game, but it's not like anything more than that.
Well, there's also kind of the promise of the tech and the reality of the tech. I mean, you can look at, Terra, right? It fundamentally wasn't even really like, it kind of worked. The algorithms kind of worked, but it was more of the financial manipulation by the people controlling it that screwed it all up. And you've got something that's supposed to stay pegged to the dollar and it's worth nothing. So it didn't really work out how it's supposed to, right? So and you hear about billions of dollars a year being stolen from people's wallets. So no, it's not perfectly secure. There's a lot of bugs that need to be worked out. Is it easier to do a transaction using Bitcoin than a MasterCard? No, it's not, and it's going to cost more, right? But there is a utility, and I think that there's a promise of revolutionizing certain things. And I think, Yakubu, one interesting thing that I look at is Africa and the access to banking, which is very low, but using cell phones to be able to still transfer money and to basically access the financial system. And I think that is one of the promises, right? Is decentralized payment rails and financial rails that anybody with some money can get access to the financial markets, whether it's to complete a transaction or to make an investment. Now, I'll be honest, like, it was hard for me to mint an NFT. Like, I'm a little, like, it was a clunky process, and it was kind of crazy, like transferring all these things around. So yeah, it needs to get easier for the masses to really fully adopt it. But I think the promise is there. And I think that there's the potential for it to revolutionize things in a positive way. I don't know, it might be worth talking about DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations. Eben, I mean, you have Wang United. You guys purchased a soccer club. You want to talk a little bit about how you envision that eventually working as a DAO, and what the benefits of such a organizational structure provide?
Yeah, I mean, look, we were when we started this, we thought we wanted to be a DAO, and then as life turned into reality, like, it just isn't. It's like we didn't think we could even get approved by the EFL to do so. So we're definitely not a DAO. We're an LLC, but we're structured in such where, like, at fully capitalized, we're a little under fully capitalized. No one's going to own more than 10%. So we have a very, like, decentralized ownership group, and we can explore and learn and possibly become that over time. My guess, having been really deep in it the last 9 months, is that that's going to be really, really hard to get there, because it requires a centralized entity to do so much of the work. It's really hard to, like, have accountability for work that's getting done without some sort of regular system. I think there are all sorts of governance items that you could maybe get to the ends of a node, but, like, I think the actual running of an organization, at least for me, I haven't figured out. And it's been a real tension in our group, because a lot of the people in the group want to move more towards that kind of coded decision making. But it's like, how do you pick, what player plays on the field when you have a manager who's there live 100 hours a day making a decision, and you have an investor who owns X number of coins off in the middle of nowhere with voting power? And so trying to figure out, like, what decisions go to which level and how to distribute them has been just a real, can I swear on this? But it's been a bit of mind F. So we're definitely figuring out the kinks in real time, but I don't think I have a good solution for stuff like that. I think it's going to be, I think for, like, investment groups, like something like what Lisa might be building, that might make a lot more sense, because you get a pitch profile, it gets given to you, you get to vote as a group and distribute as a group. And the functional DAOs that are more like investment clubs, specifically around generative art, I think have a more successful kind of coded approach than a functional organization does.
I mean, there's a couple interesting examples that I'll throw out. I mean, Link's DAO is interesting, right? It's basically trying to own golf courses and make decisions as a group through a decentralized organization structure. Raghav told me about Empire DAO. It's basically like access to co-working spaces in New York. He says that it actually operates pretty well, and there's very little organizational structure because of how they set it up. I think that makes sense. A friend of mine started a particle collection, and they buy art and fractionalize it and sell them as NFTs. But the DAO behind it determines where the actual physical art goes and gets exhibited. It's constantly exhibited around the world, so the DAO determines where it goes. And then finally, I thought that Big Green DAO is interesting. It's Kimball Musk, Elon's brother. It's his food charity that's structured as DAO, and it's his thoughts are it's a more democratized way of determining where that charity money gets sent. And so maybe the answer is there's some great applications and there's a lot of bad ones that don't actually work in the real world, like when you are paying a manager for their expertise in making